This is the Oppo Find N2, the sequel to last year's pocketable Oppo Foldable. It promises some refinements over the previous model, so could it set some new trends for the foldable scene? I'm Will for GSM Arena, and let's find out in our Oppo Find N2 review. Just like the previous model, the Oppo Find N2 is a compact foldable, and that's a breath of fresh air compared to some larger and clunkier options out there. The N2 brings some upgrades, like a new flagship-grade chipset, faster wired charging, a high refresh rate on the external display, and revamped cameras. But arguably the more impressive changes involve the build. Oppo has managed to trim a lot of fat here, and the new model is around 40 grams lighter. The difference in weight is pretty noticeable. This means the Find N is that much more comfortable to use one-handed. While folded, it feels very similar to a standard smartphone. That's also thanks in part to the outer display's relatively wide aspect ratio, compared to taller, narrower foldables like Samsung's Galaxy Z Fold 4. Despite the weight loss, the overall design is quite similar to the first Find N. For the back panel, you get the option for Gorilla Glass Victus, like we have here, or a vegan leather variant. The smooth back surface rises to meet the camera bump, and you again have rounded corners and a flat frame. Last year's hinge design was already quite elegant. The original Find N could fold flat without a gap. But now the hinge is even thinner, and is supposedly more durable too, rated for up to 400,000 folds. It can hold the phone open at any angle between 45 and 125 degrees. It also appears to be more seamless where the two halves come together. And the crease where the display folds over is narrower now, and meant to be less visible too. Unfortunately, despite the refinements in the design, there's again no ingress protection here, which you do get on the Galaxy Z Fold 4. With foldables, it's all about that tablet-like inner display. Here you get a 7.1-inch LTPO AMOLED with a 1792 by 1920 resolution and a 120Hz refresh rate. It's quite bright. We measured a maximum of 500 nits with a manual slider, and this can boost to around 1200 nits in auto mode if you need it in the sun. Plus you get that fast refresh rate here. The screen is very smooth when swiping around, and thanks to the LTPO tech it can be very adaptive too, though we never saw it dip below 60Hz. At 370 ppi, this isn't the sharpest screen around, but it still looks good. Other foldables will net you a larger screen, but this is still bigger than your typical smartphone. It's contrasty and color accurate, and there's support for HDR10+ too. Then if you switch over to the front, you get a 5.5-inch AMOLED with a 1080p resolution and again a 120Hz refresh rate. It's an upgrade over last year's 60Hz external screen, so you also get that smooth swiping here. This one's not LTPO though. It is plenty bright. We measured up to 490 nits with the manual brightness, and up to 970 nits with the auto boost. For audio, the Oppo Find N2 has a pair of stereo speakers, both found at the bottom of the device. The loudness is good here, and the quality is good too, with some noticeable bass. You can wake up and unlock the Find N2 with a side-mounted fingerprint reader. And the phone can come with 256 or 512 gigs of storage on board. The interface of the Find N2 is Oppo's latest ColorOS 13 on top of Android 13. It's pretty straightforward and feature-packed. We have a China-specific version of it here, with plenty of pre-installed Chinese apps and some functions tailored to that market. There are some features specifically designed for the foldable experience too. For example, swiping two fingers down the center quickly enables the split-screen mode. You don't get the extensive multitasking capability you would find on the Z Fold 4 though. You can split some supported apps horizontally, but this is mostly limited to a few in-house apps, and not even the browser. FlexForm is a feature that allows certain apps to split their UI into the two halves of the screen. This is especially interesting for the cameras, allowing you to take shots from different angles. At the heart of the Find N2 is a flagship-grade Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 chipset, which was up until recently the latest and greatest from Qualcomm. And although the next generation has just come out, this one is still one of the most powerful around. There's more than enough power for heavy tasks, multitasking, and heavy gaming. Plus, there's a custom Mara Silicon X NPU, which is used for things like nighttime image processing. In our proprietary tests, the overall battery life is a little less, but still decent for a foldable, with the Find N2 earning an endurance rating of 83 hours. You get 67 watts SuperVOOC charging this year, an upgrade over the previous model's 33 watts. It's very fast, able to top up the phone from 0 to 87% in half an hour. There is no wireless charging though, which was supported in last year's model. The Find N2 brings upgraded cameras over last year, as well as Hasselblad color science thanks to their partnership with Oppo. The Pro mode also now provides support for 10-bit RAW capture. The cameras include a 50-megapixel main cam, a 32-megapixel 2x telephoto cam, and a 48-megapixel ultrawide which has autofocus. During the day, the Find N2's main camera captures excellent 12.5-megapixel photos. There's low noise and well-saturated colors, as well as consistently good exposure and wide dynamic range. The sharpness is great, and the processing of fine detail is reasonably balanced. Portrait mode can be used with either the main camera at 1x or the telephoto at 2x zoom. The main cam will net you generally higher quality, and it will do a better job with difficult lighting. On the other hand, the telephoto offers more flattering facial proportions and a more comfortable shooting distance. But regardless of zoom level, subject detection is quite competent. Regular 2x zoomed shots come out in 8 megapixels. There's good contrast, and the noise performance is much improved over last year. But the lower resolution means there's a bit less detail than some competitors. The ultrawide's 12-megapixel photos are really good for this sort of camera. We like the level of sharpness and detail, and the noise is low too. The dynamic range is wide, and the color rendition is likable, but a little bit warmer than the main cams. There's no dedicated macro mode, but since the ultrawide has autofocus this year, you can use it to shoot close-ups. The phone adds some additional digital zoom too, so you get some upscaling, but the quality is still solid. When shooting with the main cam at night, the Find N2 will automatically apply night mode processing, which you cannot turn off. The photos have a nice exposure and a wide dynamic range, with well-developed shadows and contained highlights. The sharpness and detail are excellent too. There is some noise in the mix, but we prefer that to excessive noise reduction. You can also toggle on a dedicated night mode, but there's hardly any difference there. If you zoom at night, in darker scenes you'll end up with a digital crop from the main cam. These display extra softness as well as plenty of added sharpening when compared to the one-time shots. The ultrawide cam does a good job at night. The exposure is on point and you get solid detail in the shadows and well-controlled highlights. Again, the colors are a bit warmer than photos from the main cam. The Oppo Find N2 provides multiple ways to take selfies. You get an identical 32-megapixel selfie cam within both the external and the internal screens. This means that no matter how you're using the phone at the moment, you have the option to snap a selfie without having to make any special moves. The quality here is decent, but there is some softness, and the detail level isn't what you'd expect at the 32-megapixel resolution. But in addition, since the phone is foldable, you have the option to shoot selfies using the rear cameras, with the external screen acting as a viewfinder. Of course, the quality is much higher from the main cam than what you get with most any regular selfie camera. And you can also take ultra-wide selfies for a neat effect. You can shoot video with the main cam at up to 4K resolution. The quality is solid, with a wide dynamic range and good color saturation. The white balance is a bit off though, trending toward the warmer side. The ultra-wide can also shoot 4K video, and the quality is pretty good. The footage is quite sharp, and the dynamic range is wide. Again, the color reproduction is rather warm. The telephoto cam is limited to 1080p resolution, and it brings a cooler white balance. The detail is decent for 1080p, but the dynamic range isn't that wide. There's electronic stabilization available on all of the cameras, and it does a great job in smoothing out shakiness from walking and pans. So that's the Oppo Find N2. It continues what the first model set out to do, providing a solid foldable experience in a compact form factor. But there are plenty of upgrades too, an even lighter compact design, a faster chipset, speedier charging, and improved cameras. Plus higher brightness on the displays and a fast refresh rate on the external screen are quite welcome too. The main issue is that this is a China-only release for now, and anyone outside of that market would have to deal with the hassle of a gray import. That makes the Find N2 tough to recommend. But hopefully Oppo will expand its foldables into global markets in the near future. Thanks for watching guys. If you'd like to check out some globally available alternatives to the Oppo Find N2, here are a couple that we've reviewed lately. The first is the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 4. And then we have the Motorola Razr 2022. Let us know what you guys think, and I'll see you on the next one.